For the past several videos, we've been discussing environmental exposures that can harm us and diminish our life quality and quantity. We discussed external environmental chemicals like combustion products and ethanol, and then we moved on to internally generated substances like insulin and cholesterol that can cause us harm when the blood levels are high. Finally, we discussed iron as an example of an important nutrient which can cause health problems when we have too little or too much. We move now to the issue of whether our food supply can be toxic to us and cause us to get sick or die early. No topic in medicine is discussed more often or so poorly understood as this one. I think that the reason for this confusion is that each of us is unique genetically, and therefore what is good for one person may be toxic for another. We tend to generalize in this area, but generalization is dangerous because our genetic uniqueness and the variability of our individual responses to food exposures. We learned previously that all foods are composed of combinations of protein, carbohydrates, fats, alcohol, water, and fiber in variable amounts, depending upon the type of food. None of these nutrients is toxic to any of us, and all of them, with the exception of alcohol, are necessary for good health. Why then would we ever consider food to be toxic to us? The answer to this, of course, lies in the uniqueness with which each food interacts with our individual bodies, particularly the lining of our intestine as the food passes from our mouths to our colons. We eat delicious food, and we assume that our bodies will process it well and that the nutrients will be absorbed. Thankfully, this is what happens most of the time. Sometimes, however, our immune system, which lines the intestines and consists of millions of white blood cells and antibodies made by the white blood cells, becomes agitated and upset by the presence of certain foods. In the worst state, the food triggers the release of a unique group of proteins known as IgE antibodies. These, in turn, cause white blood cells to release deadly poisons that enter our bloodstream and cause us severe distress because of the presence of the food in our bowel. In the worst-case scenario, the toxic products of the immune system poison our blood vessels, cause our airways to constrict, cause us to develop terrible rashes, and drop our blood pressure and send us into shock. This type of reaction is known to us as a severe food allergy or anaphylaxis, and it may cause death if not treated promptly with adrenaline, steroids, and fluids. Obviously, none of us should eat a food that causes this type of terrible reaction. Most parents find out early in their children's lives if this type of food sensitivity exists, and they work diligently to make sure that their children are not exposed to this food or this food group. Almost any type of food could cause such a reaction in selected individuals, but certain foods like nuts and seafood are more likely than others to do so. All physicians have to be adept in the treatment of this type of toxic food allergy reaction because the reaction can be life-threatening. Fortunately, this is an unusual response to foods, but the reactions may occur not only to select foods, but also to food colorings and things that are added to the food. The second kind of toxicity that may occur in response to a food is caused by the sugars that are naturally present in foods. All of us have, in the lining of our intestines, enzymes that help us dissolve sugars and make them ready for absorption in the intestine. It turns out that all of us have variable amounts of these sugar-busting enzymes and therefore are sometimes deficient in some or all of them. The most notorious of these sugars is lactose, which is a two-component sugar present in dairy products and some other foods. Almost all of us make an enzyme called lactase that helps us to break down the lactose sugar in its two parts. Many individuals, especially those of African descent, have a limited amount of the enzyme and can therefore exceed the digestive capacity of the lactase to help digest dairy products. This results in diarrhea, bloating, and generalized discomfort for individuals who lack the lactase. The food was good, but it caused a toxic reaction related to the relative enzyme deficiency of the lactase-deficient person. It turns out that there are many people who are deficient in other enzymes that help to break down sugars into digestible particles. Such individuals may develop toxic feelings, bloating, diarrhea, and other symptoms when they eat any kind of fruit or other foods containing the offending sugar. During the past couple of decades, a new type of diet has evolved to help such individuals better handle their sugars. The diet is called FODMAPs, F-O-D-M-O-P-S. Certain fermentable sugars found mostly in fruits and vegetables are malabsorbed by genetically at-risk individuals. FODMAPs stands for fermentable oligodisaccharide, monosaccharide, and polyols. Wow. Thousands of individuals around the world apparently suffer from this type of toxicity from select foods and only can be helped when they eliminate the foods from their diet. The malabsorption syndrome can begin at any age and may actually be initiated by various types of gastrointestinal infections. The infections, caused by viruses or bacteria, damage the wall of the bowel and make it vulnerable to further damage from the poorly absorbed sugars. Another more recently accepted mechanism for toxicity of certain foods in certain individuals is the story of an immune system disorder called IgG food toxicity. Our immune system is roughly divided into cellular and humoral, that's blood-borne, components. The cellular system lines our gastrointestinal tract and our sinuses and is our first line of defense against germs and environmental irritants. The humoral or blood system is made up of antibodies of various types and sizes, and they circulate around in our blood and attack germs and other foreign substances that sneak into our blood vessels and soft tissues. There are currently 5 types of antibodies present in our blood, and all of them are important in the activity of our immune protection system. We have already discussed IgE antibodies, which are the mediators of severe food allergies, asthma, and anaphylactic shock. The others are known as IgM, IgA, IgD, and IgG antibodies. It turns out that our bodies, after exposure to foods over many years, may begin to make IgG antibodies against various foods. These antibodies promote a kind of allergy very different from the IgE antibodies discussed previously. Whereas the IgE antibodies promote swelling of the mouth, wheezing, and drops in blood pressure, IgG antibodies do no such thing. The IgG antibodies are slowly increased in volume in the blood of some individuals with repeated exposure to selected foods, and over time, they begin to cause symptoms like fatigue, joint pains, headaches, muscle pain, and loss of sense of well-being. This is still a kind of allergy. It just happens more slowly than do the reactions caused by IgE antibodies. This form of food toxicity was likely first described by a nutritionist named D'Adamo many years ago in a book entitled Eat for, the number 4, your blood type. Dr. D'Adamo determined, over many years of study, that individuals of different blood types have delayed sensitivities to selected groups of foods, and the food sensitivities were unique for the 4 main blood types, type A, B, AB, and O. This book was brought to my attention by a patient who told me that when he eliminated the foods that were bad for his blood type, his serum cholesterol level dropped from 230 to 170. I, of course, was skeptical until I read the book and began to see patients who seemed to lose weight and feel better when they ate in an appropriate way for their blood type. In recent years, several laboratories have increased the sophistication of this concept by actually measuring the antibody response to foods in the blood of people of all different blood types. This is an area of great interest to patients who have symptoms of diseases that are poorly understood by their physicians and are not getting well as they should be with appropriate therapy. Occasionally, the problem will turn out to be a low-grade immune response to some food or group of foods. The Eat for Your Type model is helpful, but the IgG antibody studies give helpful advice to people of all blood types. I'll close today's video with the story of one woman who came to my office a number of years ago with something called chronic fatigue syndrome. She hurt all over and had little energy. It's an autoimmune disease of unknown cause. She had failed to get well in the offices of a number of physicians, and she came to me as a last-ditch effort to see if I had any ideas about what was causing her to feel so bad. After a thorough evaluation, including usual blood studies, I elected to send her blood to one of the laboratories that measured IgG antibodies to food. To my surprise, the woman's results revealed only one food out of 250 foods studied to which she had an IgG antibody response. The food turned out to be tomatoes. I didn't believe it to be helpful until the woman told me that tomatoes were one of her favorite foods and that she ate them in various forms almost every day. I told her that I doubted that stopping the tomatoes would be of help to her, that so as not to waste her money spent on the test, she should perhaps begin a brief trial off tomatoes. To my surprise, within a week of her stopping tomatoes, her chronic fatigue symptoms totally disappeared, and they never returned over the ensuing months and years. Most of us are unlikely to want to give up any of our favorite foods for some blood test that may not be relevant. But those who are sick and tired of being sick and tired will sometimes do remarkable things. The patient in question continues many years later to be well and has none of the symptoms that had plagued her for several years. The point of all this is that food can be toxic to us human beings in a variety of ways, and that when we're ill, we have to entertain the possibility that something in our food may be poisoning us. We'll try to finish up on this topic with our next video. Until then, keep an open mind about how food might influence our health negatively.